My daughter changed the access code to my own house at 7:14 in the morning, one day after my wife's funeral. She said it was for my safety. She said grief makes old men forgetful. She said the new code would help everyone protect me until I was myself again. Before we continue, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means more to me than you know. 4 hours later, $241,000 disappeared from my wife's music foundation, and before sunset my 10-year-old grandson slid a folded church program into my coat pocket, looked over both shoulders, and whispered, "Grandpa, do not drink the sleepy tea tonight. Mom says after the third cup, you sign the quiet paper, and then the lake house belongs to them." I asked him what he meant, but his little face went pale, and he whispered even lower, "The paper is worth more than $12 million. Dad says you will never remember signing it." I remember standing in the church parking lot while people carried funeral flowers to their cars and told me my wife had looked peaceful. Peaceful. There are words people use around death because silence scares them. But my grandson was not scared of silence. He was scared of being heard. His little hand stayed locked around my sleeve as he leaned closer and said one more thing. "Grandma hid the red book where the piano breathes. She said you would know what that means." I did know. And that was the first moment I understood my wife had not gone to her grave trusting our daughter. She had gone to her grave leaving me a map. Before this story is over, I am going to tell you how my own daughter tried to turn grief into a signature, how my son-in-law built a $12 million trap around my supposed dementia, and how I made them walk into a quiet paper of my own. They thought they were stealing my house. They ended up signing away their freedom. But before we go any further, I want to say thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it has already caught your attention, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read those comments. They matter more than you know. And one important note before we continue. This story is told as a fictional family reenactment, shaped for drama, reflection, and emotional truth. Some details are adjusted for privacy and storytelling. The lesson is real, even if the names and exact circumstances are not. Now let me take you back to the morning everything changed. My name is Arthur Whitmore. I was 72 years old when my daughter decided I had become useful only if I was quiet. I live on the northern edge of Lake Haverford in Pennsylvania, in a white cedar house my wife Miriam and I bought in 1986, when the roof leaked, the dock sagged, and the whole place smelled faintly of wet wood and mouse traps. Miriam loved it immediately. That was her way. She could see the finished life inside broken things. I saw cracked gutters. She saw August evenings with open windows, grandkids running over the porch, coffee on the dock, and enough room for music. The music mattered. Before marriage, before mortgages, before parenthood, before my knees started making small angry sounds every time I climbed stairs, Miriam had been a pianist. Not famous. Not rich. But good in a way that made a room hold its breath. She taught music for 34 years at the county school, mostly children whose parents could not afford private lessons. She believed a child sitting correctly at a piano looked like hope learning posture. That was the kind of sentence she would say while I pretended not to smile. I worked numbers. Municipal audits first. Then estate accounting. Then private fraud examinations after I retired from the county. People think numbers are cold. They are not. Numbers are emotional records with better manners. A missing dollar tells a story. A repeated transfer tells a stronger one. A person who steals often leaves more of himself in a ledger than he ever leaves in a diary. That was my world. Receipts. Dates. Signatures. The quiet arrogance of people who believe paperwork does not have memory. Miriam used to say I could hear dishonesty in a balance sheet the way she could hear a wrong note in Bach. She gave me too much credit. Because I did not hear it in my own family until my grandson whispered the truth into my coat. Only later did the numbers arrange themselves into something ugly enough to see clearly. The lake house was valued at $3,400,000. Miriam's Music Foundation held $8,900,000 in restricted funds. My liquid accounts carried another $760,000, most of it meant for medical care, taxes, and Caleb's future. To me, those numbers were responsibilities. To Martin, they were a menu. To Caroline, they became a way to make fear feel like a plan. At the beginning, I did not know the total. Our daughter was named Caroline. At least that was the name we gave her. By the time she turned 40, the name felt like it belonged to several women at once. The little girl who used to sleep with a blue stuffed rabbit under her chin. The teenager who slammed doors and then came back 20 minutes later pretending she needed tape. The college student who called her mother from bus stations and cried because adult life felt too loud. The woman who married Martin Hale. And then the woman who stood in my foyer the morning after her mother's funeral, tapping a new code into my door and telling me it was love. Martin was the problem I almost saw too late. That is the honest way to say it. He did not arrive looking like a villain. Villains almost never do. He arrived with clean shoes, soft condolences, and the kind of voice people use when they have practiced sounding calm around fragile families. He worked as an administrator for a private memory care company called Harbor Vale Senior Living. Not a doctor. Not a nurse. But he spoke as if every word had passed through a medical filter before reaching his mouth. Decline. Risk profile. Supportive transition. Cognitive baseline. Emotional safety. I have learned that cruel people often borrow gentle language because it makes cruelty harder to interrupt. Caroline adored that about him. Or maybe she needed it. Miriam never fully trusted him. She was polite. Miriam could be polite to a snake if it was seated at the dinner table. But afterward, while rinsing plates or folding napkins, she would ask small questions. Why does Martin always answer for Caroline? Why does he use our age before he uses our names? Why does he look at this house as if he is measuring it? I told her she was grieving the old version of Caroline. I told her marriage changes people. I told her I had spent too long around fraud cases and she had spent too long around children, and together we were probably inventing problems where there were only uncomfortable adults. That is what I said. I hate that I said it. Because Miriam was almost always right when her face got quiet. She died in late October. Heart failure complicated by years of illness. The doctors did not call it sudden. When someone has been sick long enough, people stop using the word sudden, even if the empty chair feels violent. We had 3 weeks of hospice. 3 weeks of low voices, medication schedules, neighbors bringing soup, nurses wearing soft shoes, and Caroline crying in a way that seemed honest until I noticed she only cried when someone could see her. That is not fair, maybe. Maybe grief has strange timing. I am not proud of every thought I had during those days. But I remember Martin standing in the music room one evening while Miriam slept upstairs. He ran one finger along the lid of the old Steinway. Hard to maintain a place like this alone, he said. I told him I was not alone. He smiled gently. Of course not, Arthur. I only mean physically. Houses become complicated after loss. After loss. Not after death. Not after Miriam. After loss. He said it as if my wife were already an administrative event. The funeral was on a Thursday. Gray morning. Rain threatening but never falling. The kind of weather that feels undecided because the sky has more mercy than people. St. Andrews was full. Former students came. Some of them were grandparents now. One woman in a green coat told me Miriam had paid for her first recital shoes in 1989 and never told anyone. Another man, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, stood by the hymnals crying so hard he could not speak. That was Miriam. She left pieces of herself in people, quietly, without asking to be named afterward. Caroline gave the eulogy. It was beautiful. That is also the truth. She spoke about music, discipline, and the way her mother made ordinary rooms feel prepared for grace. People wept. Martin stood behind her with one hand at her back. A picture of support. I sat in the front pew beside my grandson Caleb and tried to breathe through a chest that felt packed with wet sand. Caleb was 10. Too serious for 10. Too watchful. He had Miriam's eyes, which made looking at him both comfort and punishment. During the last hymn, he reached for my hand. Not the way children reach casually. He gripped it. Hard. I thought he was grieving. I squeezed back. After the burial, after the reception in the church hall, after the casseroles and the whispered condolences and the people who told me to call if I needed anything while hoping I would never actually call, Caroline insisted on driving me home. Martin followed in his black sport utility vehicle. Caleb sat in the back seat with his backpack on his knees. I remember thinking that was odd. Who brings a backpack to a funeral? At the house, Caroline became efficient. Too efficient. She opened curtains. Checked the refrigerator. Asked where Miriam kept certain papers. Moved through the rooms as if grief had given her a clipboard. I was too tired to object. I went upstairs, took off my suit jacket, sat on the edge of the bed, and touched the indentation on Miriam's pillow because that is what foolish old men do when nobody is watching. The next morning, I came downstairs and found Martin in the foyer holding a small black keypad in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. Caroline stood beside him with coffee. My coffee. In my mug. Morning, Dad, she said. We made a small safety update. The old lock was gone. The brass deadbolt Miriam had polished every spring was sitting on the entry table like a pulled tooth. I stared at it. What safety update? Martin gave me the kind of smile people give when they have already decided your resistance confirms their point. Smart access. Nothing dramatic. It lets Caroline check who comes in and out of my house. Caroline stepped closer. Dad, please. We talked about this. No, I said. You talked about it. I was not part of the conversation. Her expression softened too quickly. That was the first warning I missed that morning. You barely slept. You asked me twice last night where Mom kept the sugar. Because she moved it every 3 months for 40 years. Martin looked down. Not embarrassed. Recording the moment in his mind. Caroline touched my arm. We are not taking anything from you. We are helping you stay safe while you adjust. Adjust. Another soft word carrying a knife. I should have ordered them both out. I should have taken the new lock off with the same screwdriver he brought into my home. Instead I was tired. That is the part predators count on. Not stupidity. Fatigue. Grief. The human need to avoid one more fight while your wife's funeral flowers are still wet on the table. So I let it pass. By noon, Caroline had made tea. She had never made tea in my house before. Miriam made tea. I made coffee. Caroline drank sparkling water from cans that cost too much and tasted like weather. But that day she placed a mug in front of me and said, "This will help you rest." It smelled sweet. Lavender maybe. Something else beneath it. I took one sip and set it down. Too sweet, I said. Her eyes flicked to Martin. Just once. Small. Fast. The kind of glance I had spent a career seeing across conference tables when two people thought the auditor was looking down. My body noticed before my mind did. That afternoon, Caleb asked if I would walk him to the dock. Caroline hesitated. Honey, Grandpa is tired. Caleb looked at me. Not begging. Asking without words. I stood. Fresh air will not kill me. Martin laughed softly. No one thinks fresh air will kill you, Arthur. That was exactly how he worked. He made ordinary resistance sound ridiculous by naming the wrong fear. Caleb and I walked down the slope behind the house. The dock boards were slick from morning mist. The lake lay flat and gray, with geese cutting dark lines through the surface. For a minute neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Grandpa." His voice was too small. I turned. He was looking back at the house. Caroline stood at the kitchen window. Martin stood behind her. Both watching. Caleb bent as if tying his shoe. Then he slipped the folded church program from his sleeve and pushed it into my coat pocket. "Do not open it here," he whispered. "Caleb. Please." Children should not know how to say please like that. We walked back slowly. At the porch steps, he leaned closer one last time. "Grandma said you would know where the piano breathes." Then he ran inside before I could answer. I stood there with the lake wind moving through my shirt and the church program burning a hole through my pocket. The piano breathes. Miriam used that phrase for the soundboard of the Steinway. She said cheap pianos only spoke. Good pianos breathed. In the music room, beneath the old Steinway bench, there was a narrow false bottom that my father-in-law had built decades earlier to store sheet music during a damp winter. Almost no one knew about it. Miriam did. I did. And apparently, before she died, she told Caleb. That night, Caroline insisted on staying. "Just for a few days," she said. Martin brought overnight bags as if the decision had existed long before the sentence. Caleb slept in the small guest room near the stairs. I lay awake until the house settled. At 1:18 in the morning, I got up. I remember the exact time because grief had turned me into a clock watcher. The hallway was dark. Caroline's door was shut. Martin's voice drifted faintly from inside. Low. Urgent. I could not make out words. I went downstairs barefoot, every floorboard suddenly louder than I remembered. The music room smelled like dust, old polish, and the faint trace of Miriam's hand lotion. I did not turn on the main light. I used the small lamp by the bookcase. The Steinway sat where it had always sat, black and still, like a sleeping animal. I knelt by the bench, slid my fingers under the lip, and found the notch. The false bottom opened with a soft click. Inside was a red ledger. Miriam's red ledger. She had used those books for household notes, recital fees, recipe changes, birthday lists, and the kind of private records only women with disciplined minds keep while men claim they are managing everything. This one had a yellow envelope taped to the cover. Arthur. Her handwriting. My name. Just seeing it nearly took me apart. I sat on the floor with my back against the piano and opened the envelope. There was one page inside. Arthur, if you are reading this, then Caleb was brave enough, or Caroline got careless enough, or God was merciful enough for both. Do not drink what they prepare for you. Do not sign anything in that house. Do not let Martin decide what grief means. I do not have proof of everything, but I have enough to know our daughter is in trouble and Martin is steering her towards something ugly. Check the red ledger. Look at Harbor Quiet Care. Look at East Vale Holdings. Look at the foundation withdrawals after my first hospital admission. And Arthur, listen to Caleb. He sees more than they think. I love you. I am sorry I could not stay long enough to say this out loud. Miriam. I read it once. Then again. Then I pressed the page to my mouth because sound was trying to come out of me and I could not risk waking the house. Miriam had known. Not everything. But enough. She had been dying and still investigating from a bed they thought had made her harmless. That is the thing about the right woman. Even illness does not make her small. The ledger was worse. Not because it told the whole story. Because it showed the shape of one. Miriam had written dates, initials, and dollar amounts. Foundation transfer, $42,000. Harbor Quiet Care Consulting fee, $18,500. East Vale Holdings linked to Martin Hale. Caroline's signature inconsistent. Martin present at bank. Caleb said quiet paper. Caleb said third cup. Caleb said mom cried after phone call. Then came the entry that made my hands go cold. Projected asset control after quiet paper, $12,060,000. She had underlined it twice. Below it, in smaller writing, she had listed the pieces. Lake House, $3,400,000. Foundation access, $8,900,000. Liquid accounts, $760,000. Estimated first-year leakage if Martin controls care, $1,200,000. There were small notes in the margins. Caroline not sleeping. Martin answers every question. Arthur tired. Do not burden until proof. That one hurt. Do not burden until proof. She had carried suspicion alone because she thought I was already carrying too much. My wife protected me from the truth while dying. My daughter planned to use my grief as a doorway. Both things were true at once. That is how families break you. Not with one emotion. With too many at the same time. I heard a floorboard above me. I closed the ledger, slid it under my sweater, replaced the false bottom, and stood. By the time Martin appeared at the music room doorway, I had one hand resting on the piano and my face arranged into confusion. Arthur, he said. Soft voice. Bare feet. Too awake. I thought I heard Miriam, I said. It came out so naturally that for a moment I frightened myself. His face softened. Not with pity. Opportunity. That happens, he said. Grief does strange things to perception. I nodded slowly. I suppose it does. He stepped closer. His eyes moved over the piano bench. The closed cabinet. My hands. Maybe you should come back upstairs. Caroline will worry. Of course. He guided me by the elbow. Not hard. That would come later if he needed it. Just enough to practice the gesture. Just enough to see whether I would accept being handled. I accepted it. That was my first performance. By morning, I understood three things. Miriam had suspected financial theft from the music foundation she created for low-income students. Caleb had overheard enough to be in danger. And Caroline and Martin were preparing something called the quiet paper, something they needed me weakened enough to sign. I did not know yet whether quiet paper meant power of attorney, trust transfer, medical consent, guardianship filing, deed authority, or some ugly bundle of all of it. But I knew what quiet meant. Quiet meant no argument. Quiet meant no witnesses. Quiet meant an old man asleep in his chair while other people moved his life into their names. That morning I poured Caroline's tea into the hydrangeas when no one was looking. By noon, I had made my first call. Not to the police. Not yet. Police need facts. Families produce fog. I called Mara Whitlock. Mara had been my attorney for 26 years, though friend was closer to the truth and battlefield commander was closer still. She was 68, wore silver bracelets that sounded like a warning when she moved, and had once told a probate judge that incompetence was not a legal strategy just because counsel had built a business model around it. She answered on the second ring. Arthur. I need to see you today. A pause. Is this grief or danger? That is why I called Mara. She did not waste time pretending those were the same thing. Both, I said. Come at 3. Bring whatever has your voice sounding like that. At 3, I sat in her office above the bakery on Pike Street and placed Miriam's red ledger on her desk. Mara did not touch it at first. She looked at it the way people should look at evidence left by the dead. With respect. Then she read. For 40 minutes, she said almost nothing. She turned pages. Made notes. Asked for dates. Asked about the door code. Asked about the tea. Asked exactly what Caleb said. When I told her, her jaw tightened. Quiet paper, she repeated. Yes. I hate family nicknames for legal crimes. What could it be? Several things. None comforting. She opened her laptop and began searching records. Public filings first. Then foundation documents. Then county deed notices. Then business registrations. I watched her work, and for the first time since Miriam died, the floor under me felt almost solid. Not safe. Just less lonely. At 4:12, Mara stopped typing. Harbor Quiet Care Limited Liability Company, she said. Created 14 months ago. Mailing address belongs to a business services firm in Harrisburg. Registered agent connects to East Vale Holdings. And East Vale. She clicked again. Part ownership traces through a trust structure I would need time to unpack. But Martin Hale appears twice in associated filings. Not directly as owner. As administrative consultant. Of course. There is more. She turned the screen toward me. A notice had been filed 3 weeks earlier. Not completed. Not served. Prepared. Petition for temporary protective management due to suspected cognitive instability. My name. Arthur James Whitmore. My birth date. My address. My daughter's name listed as proposed family representative. Martin's company listed as recommended transitional care advisor. I stared until the letters stopped feeling like letters. They are trying to declare me incompetent. Mara's voice was steady. They are preparing to. On what basis? Grief response. Confusion. Safety concerns. Potential financial vulnerability. Financial vulnerability, I said. The laugh that came out of me did not sound like mine. Mara looked up. Arthur. Listen carefully. Do not confront them with this. They changed my locks. Do not confront them. They are drugging my tea. We do not know what is in the tea yet. My wife warned me from her grave. And if you storm into that house waving a red ledger, they will tell everyone you are having a grief break. I hated her for being right. She leaned forward. You need proof that survives their story. How? You let them think the story is working. That sentence sat between us. I understood it immediately. I did not like understanding it. Act confused. Not too much, she said. Confused enough to make them comfortable. Lucid enough not to endanger yourself. That is a narrow bridge. Then walk carefully. She pulled a small digital recorder from her drawer. Pennsylvania wiretap rules are not simple, she said. Do not play amateur spy without guidance. We are going to keep this lawful. You will record only where we have proper consent or where our investigator sets up controlled meetings. For now, write everything down. Save every cup. Every receipt. Every text. Every document. Every time they use medical words, note the context. Investigator. Yes. Who? Sam Price. Retired state investigator. He is rude, useful, and allergic to people like Martin. You will appreciate 2 of those qualities. I almost smiled. Almost. Before I left, Mara copied the ledger and sealed the original in a fireproof evidence envelope. When she handed it back, she held my eyes. Your wife knew this might happen. That means you are not starting from nothing. I nodded. And Arthur. Yes. Protect Caleb first. Assets second. Pride never. That became the rule. Protect Caleb first. Asset second. Pride never. I repeated it the whole drive home. When I pulled into my own driveway, the porch light was on, though I had not turned it on. Caroline opened the door before I reached it. Again. Too fast. "Dad," she said. "Where were you?" "Not worried. Testing." I drove to the hardware store. "For what?" "Batteries." "You did not say you were leaving." I looked at the keypad Martin had installed. I did not know I had to. Behind her, Martin appeared in the hall. "Nobody is saying that." We were concerned. "About batteries." Caroline flinched at my tone. "Good." Then I remembered the bridge. Confused enough. Lucid enough. I touched my forehead. "I am tired. I think I forgot why I went halfway there." Martin's face changed. It was subtle. But I saw it. Satisfaction hiding behind concern. "That is understandable," he said. "You have been under enormous stress." "Maybe tea would help," Caroline said. I smiled at her. Maybe it would. That night, she brought the mug to my study. I pretended to sip. When she left, I poured most of it into a clean jam jar and labeled it with date and time. Then I put it behind a row of Miriam's cookbooks in the pantry. By the end of the week, I had 4 jars. Each one smelled slightly different. Each one represented another small piece of the trap they thought they were building around me. Sam Price came to the house the following Monday pretending to be a piano technician. That was Mara's idea. "A piano in a grieving house is believable," she said. Sam did not look like a piano technician. He looked like a man who knew where bodies were found in fields. Late 50s. Square face. Gray hair cut short. Hands too still. He carried a tool bag and said, "Beautiful instrument," in a tone suggesting he had never voluntarily enjoyed music. Caroline hovered in the doorway. Dad did not mention a tuning. Sam opened the case and looked inside the Steinway with professional seriousness. The appointment was made before Mrs. Whitmore passed. "I can come back." That was smart. Using Miriam's name made Caroline hesitate. "No," she said finally. "If Mom scheduled it, go ahead." She left. Sam waited until her footsteps faded. Then he whispered, "Where is the sample?" I handed him the jars from the pantry, one by one, wrapped in dish towels. He placed them in his tool bag. "Any signed documents yet?" "No." "Any papers shown?" "Not yet." "Any pressure?" "Constant." He looked at me for the first time like a person instead of a task. "Good. Pressure leaves marks." While pretending to tune the piano, he checked the room for devices. There were 2. One under the side table. One behind the vent. Small cameras. Not security cameras. Watchers. Sam's mouth tightened. "Do not remove them," he said. "Now we know which rooms they believe matter. They are watching me." "Yes." "In my own house." "Yes." "And if I tear them out?" "They know you know." Again, the same lesson. Do not move too early. A decent lie is hard to fight because truth makes you want to act before strategy is ready. Sam left after 40 minutes and charged me $180 for a piano tuning he did not perform. He said it was for realism. I told him his realism was expensive. He said fraud investigations usually are. That afternoon, Caroline found me in the sunroom staring at the lake. "Martin thinks we should schedule a cognitive wellness check." There it was. The first formal step. Cognitive wellness, I repeated. Just a baseline. For what? She sat across from me. She had Miriam's hands. That was one of the crueler details. Same long fingers. Same habit of rubbing thumb against ring finger when nervous. But Miriam's hands made music. Caroline's were folded over a plan. Dad, you were in the music room at 1 in the morning. You told Martin you heard Mom. You forgot the door code twice. You drove somewhere and could not explain why. She listed them gently. Like a daughter. Like a prosecutor. Maybe I am old, I said. Old is not the issue. Then what is? Safety. I looked at the lake. That word is getting crowded around here. She blinked. What does that mean? Nothing. I let my voice go tired. I suppose Martin knows best. That pleased her more than it should have. She reached across the table and took my hand. He does not want your money, Dad. He wants you protected. I looked at her hand on mine and thought of Caleb's whisper. After the third cup, you sign the quiet paper. Of course, I said. The evaluation was scheduled for Thursday. Not with my doctor. With a consultant Martin recommended. Dr. Elaine Porter, cognitive transition specialist. Mara found her license in 6 minutes. Licensed, yes. Clean enough, yes. But Sam found the problem underneath. Porter had contracts with 3 Harbor Vale facilities. Harbor Vale was Martin's network. That made her less a doctor and more a doorway. Mara advised me to attend. Let them create their paper trail, she said. But bring yours. Meaning. I will be in the waiting room as your legal representative. If they block me, that tells us something. If they allow me, that tells us something else. Caroline hated that. She tried to hide it, but I saw the anger flicker behind her eyes when I told her Mara was coming. Dad, this is not legal. It is medical. Then a lawyer should be harmless. Martin stepped in smoothly. Arthur, sometimes legal presence makes clinicians less comfortable. Then we need braver clinicians. For 1 second, he forgot to smile. Just one. It was enough. Thursday arrived bright and cold. The clinic smelled like hand sanitizer and fake vanilla. Caroline sat beside me in the waiting room, one knee bouncing. Martin stood near the reception window answering emails. Mara walked in exactly on time wearing a navy coat and the expression of a woman who enjoyed ruining bad plans before lunch. Caroline stood. Mara, I really do not think this is necessary. That is all right, Mara said. I am necessary whether or not you think so. The evaluation lasted 50 minutes. Dr. Porter asked me questions. Date. President. Location. 3 words to remember. Clock drawing. Small tasks designed to make old age prove itself innocent. I answered well. Not perfectly. Perfect would look performed. But well. When she asked why I was there, I said, my daughter is worried my grief has made me too easy to guide. Dr. Porter's pen paused. Do you feel easy to guide, Mr. Whitmore? No. But I think some people are hoping. She looked at me for a long moment. The first crack in her professional neutrality. Afterward, Mara requested a copy of the evaluation summary. Dr. Porter said it would be sent in due course. Mara smiled. Due course is not a delivery method. Caroline turned red. Martin placed a calming hand on her back. I watched them both. By Friday, Mara had the preliminary note. It did not say dementia. It did not say incapacity. It said grief, fatigue, and mild situational distraction. It recommended ordinary support and follow-up with my primary doctor. Not Harbor Vale. Not transitional care. Not legal management. Mara called it good news. Sam called it inconvenient for the enemy. He was right. That night, Martin and Caroline argued in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. I stood in the dark hall near the pantry and listened through the old heating vent Miriam had always meant to replace. She was supposed to understand the situation, Caroline hissed. She understood too much, Martin said. Then find another way. I am trying. But your father is not as soft as you said he would be. Do not blame me. I am blaming time. The petition loses strength if we wait. And the foundation audit. I can manage the foundation if he signs. If, she said. He will. Caleb is getting nervous. A pause. Then keep Caleb away from him. There it was. Protect Caleb first. Assets second. Pride never. I went back upstairs before anger made me stupid. On Saturday morning, Caleb was gone. Caroline said he had a sleepover. She said it too quickly. No backpack. No excited child. No parent name. Just sleepover. I texted Mara. Caleb removed from house. She replied within 1 minute. Do not react. Sam checking. Those 26 minutes before Sam answered were some of the longest of my life. Then my phone buzzed. Caleb is with Caroline's friend Tessa. Safe. We have eyes. I sat down in the mudroom and breathed for the first time since breakfast. Predators isolate the witness before they move the target. I had known that in fraud cases. I had written it in reports. I had testified to it. It feels different when the witness is a 10-year-old boy who still sleeps with a night light shaped like a moon. Sunday was the day they brought out the quiet paper. It began with pancakes. That still bothers me. Evil should not smell like maple syrup. Caroline made breakfast and played Miriam's favorite Sunday playlist through the kitchen speaker. Too sentimental. Too staged. Martin wore a sweater instead of his usual dress shirt. Soft man costume. The tea came in a blue mug. I poured it into the fern beside my chair when Caroline turned toward the stove. The fern did not deserve that, but war has casualties. After breakfast, Martin cleared his throat. Arthur, Caroline and I want to discuss something practical. Practical. There was always a practical door into something immoral. Caroline placed a folder on the table. Cream paper. Silver clip. A little sticky note on top with my name written in Caroline's careful hand. Dad. Not Arthur. Not Mr. Whitmore. Dad. That was manipulation too. It is not a big decision, she said. It just lets me help if something happens. Something. Martin sat across from me. Medical appointments. Banking calls. Foundation communications. House maintenance. You remain in control. This only reduces friction. Friction, I said. He smiled. Paperwork friction. I opened the folder. Durable power of attorney. Foundation authorization addendum. Residential transition consent. Preliminary agreement for consultation with Harbor Vale Senior Living. There it was. Quiet paper was not one paper. It was a bundle. A net. I let my fingers shake. That part was not acting. This seems like a lot. Caroline moved closer. Only because legal language looks scary. Mara should review it. Martin answered too quickly. Mara is excellent for estate issues. This is family support. Then she will support it. Caroline's eyes hardened. Dad, please do not make this adversarial. I am reading. You are resisting. The old Caroline flashed then. Not the little girl. The adult who hated being blocked. Martin covered it. No one needs to sign today. Caroline looked at him sharply. He continued, smooth again. We only wanted to introduce the idea. Let your father get comfortable. Comfortable. I closed the folder. I am tired. Of course, Caroline said. She reached for the folder. I kept one hand on it. Just long enough to make her tug. Just long enough to see the hunger in her face. Then I let go. That night I wrote everything down. Not emotionally. Precisely. Time. Words. Documents shown. Who touched folder. Tea served in blue mug. Caleb absent. Caroline said resisting. Martin said no one needs to sign today. I had spent my career telling clients that notes made after an event are better than memories made after panic. Now I was applying my own advice in the dark of my bedroom while my daughter's husband slept 2 rooms away and thought he was patient. On Monday, Sam's report arrived. The tea samples contained a sedative medication. Not a wild poison. Not something from a crime show. Something ordinary enough to explain away. Something that could be prescribed. Something that made drowsiness, confusion, and compliance look like grief in an old man. That was almost worse. Because ordinary evil is easier to defend. Caroline could say I asked for sleep support. Martin could say he was helping me rest. A jury could hear confusion where there had been strategy. But Sam found more. The pharmacy receipts were not in my name. They were linked to Martin's administrative account through a consulting physician connected to Harbor Vale. Not proof of intent alone. But another thread. Threads matter. Enough threads become rope. By Wednesday, Mara had reviewed the quiet paper bundle. She called me to her office and placed the pages in 4 neat stacks. This one gives Caroline financial authority. Tap. This one gives her operational authority over the Miriam Whitmore Music Foundation. Tap. This one creates a path for voluntary residential transition, which becomes less voluntary once the first 2 are in place. Tap. And this addendum, buried near the end, authorizes sale or encumbrance of the lake house if deemed necessary for care continuity. Then she placed a final summary page in front of me. If you sign all of this, they can control or redirect more than $12 million before a judge has time to understand what happened. Care continuity. I almost laughed. They were going to steal my house in the name of keeping me safe inside somewhere else, then use Miriam's foundation as their private bank while calling it protection. Can we stop them now? We can block the documents. We can file warnings. We can confront. But right now they still have a story. What story? Grieving father. Concerned daughter. Experienced care administrator. Necessary documents misunderstood by an emotional old man and his aggressive attorney. I hate that story. So do I. But it has enough shape to breathe unless we close the room around it. Sam leaned back from the corner chair. Make them think Sunday failed because you were tired, not because you were suspicious. Then what? Mara looked at him. Sam looked at me. Neither wanted to say it first. So I did. Then we give them another signing. Mara nodded. Controlled. Witnessed. Documented. With law enforcement aware and protective services involved. They will not incriminate themselves if lawyers are in the room. Then lawyers will not appear to be in the room. Sam opened his folder. Martin has a preferred mobile notary. Beatrice Sloan. We contacted her. She has concerns of her own. Apparently Martin has used her twice for elderly clients who later disputed documents. She wants out, but she also wants protection. She will help. Yes. Mara added, the next signing will be their idea. But we will control the table. That was when the revenge became real to me. Not loud revenge. Not a fist through a wall. Something cleaner. I would let them taste victory. I would let Martin watch my hand move toward the signature line. I would let Caroline believe the $12 million door had opened. And just before they stepped through it, the room would close behind them. The plan was ugly because it required patience. I would act weaker. Caroline would regain confidence. Martin would believe the first attempt had softened me. Mara would prepare a decoy review protocol with Beatrice. Sam would coordinate with Detective Luis Navarro from Financial Exploitation. The real documents would be scanned, logged, and marked. The meeting would happen in my dining room, where the cameras Martin installed would become useful in the opposite direction. And if they pushed me while impaired, if they described the transition plan, if they connected the T to the signing, if they showed intent, the room would finally have teeth. I did not sleep much that week. Not because of fear. Fear I understood. It was the performance that exhausted me. Letting Caroline help me stand. Asking twice where I left my glasses while they sat on my head. Letting Martin explain simple things slowly. Pretending to lose track of a conversation so he would learn to underestimate me again. There is a special humiliation in acting helpless for people who want you that way. You feel dirty even when you know you are baiting them. On Thursday evening, Caleb came back. He stood in the foyer with his overnight bag, eyes moving from his mother to Martin to me. Caroline said, "Grandpa has been doing better." Caleb knew how to hear the warning inside that. He nodded. At dinner, he barely spoke. When Caroline went to take a call and Martin went to the pantry, Caleb slipped his hand under the table and pressed something into my palm. A receipt. Pharmacy receipt. The item name was partly torn, but Sam would later confirm it matched the sedative family found in the tea. On the back, in Caleb's uneven handwriting, were 6 words. He says Saturday is the day. I looked at him. His eyes were wet, but he did not cry. 10-year-old boys should cry more easily than that. I folded the receipt into my napkin. Martin returned carrying the tea tray. "Arthur," he said warmly. "Your evening cup." I took it. I smiled. And I wondered how many monsters in history had worn soft sweaters and called themselves helpful. Saturday came bright and sharp, with blue winter sky and sunlight on the lake. The kind of day Miriam would have called deceptive because beauty can make people careless. Caroline made a roast. Martin brought pastries from the bakery. Caleb was sent upstairs with a tablet and instructions to stay quiet because Grandpa needed calm. At 2 o'clock, Beatrice Sloane arrived. She was a compact woman in her early 60s with red-framed glasses, a brown leather notary bag, and the alert look of someone walking into a room where every chair might lie. She greeted Martin first. He greeted her too warmly. "Beatrice, thank you so much for making time." "Of course," she said. "I always prefer important signatures to happen slowly." That sentence irritated him. Good. Caroline led everyone to the dining room. I sat at the head of the table because it was still my house and because Mara had insisted. "Position matters," she had said. "Do not give up the head of your own table, even as theater." There were 3 cameras in the room now. 2 Martin believed he controlled. 1 Sam had installed inside the old regulator clock with proper authorization through the controlled operation. Detective Navarro and Sam were in a van 2 houses down. Mara was in the bakery office with a live audio feed and enough rage to power the county. Caleb was not upstairs. That was the first secret Caroline did not know. Rosa, Miriam's former teaching assistant, had picked him up from the side door 20 minutes earlier and taken him to Mara's office. Protect Caleb first. Everything else second. At 2:11, Caroline placed the quiet paper in front of me. "Dad," she said softly. "We are just making sure nothing falls through the cracks." I looked down at the pages. My hand shook. Again, not entirely acting. "Will this change the house?" Martin answered. "No immediate change." "Immediate." Beatrice looked up. "That is an interesting qualifier." Martin smiled. "Only legally precise." I like precision, Beatrice said. She opened her notebook. Mr. Whitmore, before anything is signed, I need to ask you a few questions privately. Caroline stiffened. Privately? Yes. Martin leaned forward. Given Arthur's recent confusion, Caroline should remain for support. Beatrice's smile did not move. Support is helpful after free intent is established, not before. Caroline looked at me. I let my face drift toward uncertainty. It is all right, I said. I think. Martin touched the table. Arthur gets anxious alone with officials. Beatrice looked at him. Then we will go slowly. He had to choose. Resist too hard and look like pressure. Allow it and lose control. He allowed it. They stepped into the kitchen while Beatrice stayed with me. Her voice lowered. You all right? No. Good. Honest answer. Need water? No. Ready? Yes. She asked formal questions loudly enough for the recording. Name. Date. Purpose of documents. Whether anyone had given me medication. Whether anyone pressured me. Whether I understood the house clause. On the last question, I answered, I understand they want the house available for care continuity. Beatrice repeated it. Care continuity. That is what Martin called it. Then she invited them back in. Martin's eyes moved over my face. He was trying to read how much had happened. Caroline sat beside me. Too close. Dad, you are doing so well. That almost broke my heart. Because once, long ago, she had said the same words while I taught her to ride a bike. Dad, you are doing so well. Same voice. Different cliff. Beatrice went page by page. Slowly. Martin grew impatient by the third page. By the fifth page, his calm started thinning. By the eighth, he interrupted. With respect, Beatrice, Mr. Whitmore does not need every boilerplate clause read aloud. Mr. Whitmore decides what Mr. Whitmore needs. Caroline squeezed my arm. Dad is getting tired. Then we can stop. No, Caroline said too fast. The room changed. Everyone felt it. Even Caroline. She tried to soften. I only mean we should not make this more difficult than necessary. Beatrice turned a page. Difficulty is not the enemy of consent. Pressure is. Martin's jaw tightened. He looked at Caroline. That same fast glance from the tea. I let my head dip slightly. Maybe I should just sign. Caroline exhaled. Martin's shoulders loosened. There it was. Hope in predators looks like relief on decent people. Beatrice placed the pen near my hand. Before you do, I need verbal confirmation that no one has promised or threatened anything related to your grandson. Caroline went pale. Martin looked at her. Not at me. At her. That was useful. Why would you ask that? Caroline said. Routine question. It was not. But it sounded like it could be. I whispered, Caleb. Caroline turned to me. Caleb is fine. I looked at Martin. Will I still see him? Martin leaned forward, voice soft. Arthur, if you cooperate with the transition, everything becomes easier for Caleb. No conflict. No stress. No frightened child in the middle. Beatrice's pen paused. In the van, Sam later told me, Detective Navarro sat upright and mouthed, there. I asked, and if I do not? Caroline closed her eyes briefly. Martin answered anyway. Then we have to make decisions based on safety. Including Caleb's exposure to instability. Safety again. Always safety. I said, so I sign, and I see Caleb. Caroline whispered, Dad. But Martin saw the finish line. He mistook my question for surrender. Yes, he said. You sign, we simplify the process, and we keep the family together in the cleanest way possible. In Harbor Vale. Temporarily. And the house. Managed. By Caroline. With my assistance, he said. And Miriam's foundation. Protected from administrative disruption. How much disruption are we talking about? He smiled before he caught himself. He should not have smiled. Arthur, the foundation alone has nearly $9 million under care. The lake house is worth more than $3 million. There are liquid accounts, insurance reserves, and donor commitments. This is not the time for emotional confusion. It is the time for responsible control. Responsible control. That phrase would later be played in court. I looked at Caroline. Is that what you want? Her eyes were wet now. Not because she was innocent. Because guilt and desire had collided. I want this to stop being so hard, she said. That was the most honest thing she had said in weeks. Not I want you safe. Not I want to protect Caleb. I want this to stop being so hard. Martin placed the pen in my hand. Just sign here. Beatrice said, do not direct his hand. He pulled back. I stared at the signature line. Arthur James Whitmore. There is something obscene about seeing your name waiting beneath language designed to erase you. I lowered the pen. My hand touched the page. Then I did the thing Martin had waited weeks to see. I signed. Not my legal signature. Not the one on my bank files, tax returns, foundation records, and deeds. I signed the broken practice signature Mara and I had rehearsed for the decoy copy, a signature close enough to make Martin breathe out and wrong enough to prove he had not cared whether I was truly myself. Caroline covered her mouth. Martin's face opened with naked relief. For one perfect second, they believed they had won $12 million with one tired old man's hand. Then Beatrice lifted the page, looked directly at Martin, and said, for the record, you accepted a signature after offering access to a child and after describing control of the house and foundation. Martin froze. What record? From the kitchen came 3 knocks. Fast. The signal. Detective Navarro entered first. Not dramatically. No door kicked open. No shouting. Just a man in a dark coat stepping into my dining room with 2 officers behind him and saying, everyone please move your hands away from the documents. Caroline's face went blank. Martin stood too fast. What is this? Navarro showed his badge. A protective intervention. Sit down, Mr. Hale. Martin laughed. That was his mistake. It came out wrong. Too sharp. Too offended. This is absurd. We are helping an elderly family member. Mara entered behind the officers. Then you will be thrilled to explain why your help requires sedatives, a hidden camera, a decoy notary packet, a child threat, and $12 million in assets. Caroline looked at me. Dad. What did you do? Her voice was not broken. It was betrayed. That told me more than tears would have. I set the pen down. I did exactly what you taught Caleb to fear. I stayed quiet until the paper spoke. That was the first time Martin looked afraid. Only for a second. But I saw it. Caleb was the loose thread he could not manage from the table. Navarro separated us. Caroline in the kitchen with 1 officer. Martin in the dining room with Sam and Navarro. Me in the sunroom with Mara. The documents were photographed. The teacup was bagged. The folder was logged. The recordings were secured. Beatrice gave Navarro the decoy signature sheet and the real document packet she had kept sealed in her bag. That was the sweetest part. Martin had pushed for the signature so hard that he never noticed the paper he placed in front of me was not the final legal copy. He had not wanted consent. He had wanted control. And now the only signature he had captured was proof of how little consent mattered to him. But the day was not over. Because arrests are not always immediate. That is something stories lie about. The law does not always move when your heart wants it to. Navarro had enough for intervention. Enough for warrants. Enough for emergency protective steps. But Martin was not finished. Men like him do not collapse because one room turns against them. They adapt. By evening, Caroline and Martin had been told to leave my property. The old code was disabled. A locksmith changed the lock again. This time on my order. Caleb stayed with Mara and Rosa. Caroline called 17 times. I did not answer. At 9:43, a text came from her. Dad, you do not understand what you have done. Martin says the Foundation records will destroy Mom's name if this goes public. I read it twice. Then I understood. The next threat was not me. It was Miriam. They were going to soil the dead to protect the living criminals. I showed Mara. She said one word. Good. Good. She is telling us where the next door is. The Foundation records. Miriam's name. That meant something in the Music Foundation was either forged, diverted, or both. The next morning, Sam and Dennis Greer entered the story. Dennis was a forensic accountant with white hair, terrible posture, and the cheerful manner of a man who considered spreadsheets a contact sport. He arrived with 2 laptops, a portable scanner, and a sandwich wrapped in foil. I do not work hungry, he said. Mara pointed to the dining room table. You are going to work angry too. Dennis spent 11 hours with the Foundation records. By the time the sun went down, he had built a timeline on 3 taped sheets of paper. It was ugly. 2 years earlier, when Miriam's illness worsened, Caroline had begun helping with Foundation correspondence. 6 months later, consulting fees appeared. Harbor Quiet Care. East Vale Holdings. Administrative Continuity Support. Youth Program Relocation Analysis. Donor Transition Management. Soft Language. Hard Theft. The first visible total was $386,400, but Dennis said that was only the part stupid enough to stand near the light. By the end of the second pass, the suspected exposure had climbed to $1,170,000. The full structure around the Foundation and the lake house pointed back toward the same number Miriam had feared, more than $12 million. Not all at once. That would have been too loud. Pieces. $12,000. $18,500. $24,000. A reimbursement here. An advisory fee there. Money leaving Miriam's music program and walking through polite invoices into structures Martin could touch. Dennis tapped one line with his pen. This is the condo. What condo? He turned the laptop. A lakeside condo in Maryland. Purchased through East Vale Holdings. Closing activity lined up 3 weeks after a large Foundation transfer. Miriam had circled that transfer in the red ledger. She had written only one word beside it. Why? I stared at that word longer than the numbers. Why? My wife had asked the right question before any of us had courage enough to answer it. By midnight, Dennis had found something worse. Several scholarship recipients listed in Foundation reports had never received funds. Their names had been used to justify payouts. Children Miriam intended to help had become cover for adults stealing from her memory while she was still alive. That was the moment I stopped thinking of Caroline as confused. Not hurt. Not led astray. Not pressured by Martin. She had signed enough. Approved enough. Ignored enough. At some point, a daughter becomes responsible for what she lets greed do with her mother's name. The following week was evidence. Not drama. Evidence. Bank confirmations. Scholarship calls. Invoices. Pharmacy records. Security device logs. Text messages. The petition draft. The T analysis. Caleb's interview with a child specialist. He did not have to testify in a room full of adults. Mara and Navarro made sure of that. But he did speak. Carefully. With someone trained to listen without leading. He talked about the tea. He talked about the quiet paper. He talked about hearing Martin say, "After Saturday, your grandfather will be easier." He talked about his mother crying in the pantry and saying, "We already went too far to stop." When I heard that line, I had to leave the room. Not because it surprised me. Because it sounded like the Caroline I knew. Not monstrous. Weak. Then weak long enough to become monstrous. There is a difference, but the damage often looks the same. Martin disappeared for 36 hours. Of course he did. He did not run far. Men like him often mistake motion for escape. Sam found him at the Maryland condo with a suitcase, a laptop, and $22,000 in cash. Caroline was not with him. That detail mattered. She had gone to her own house and sat in the dark with Caleb's empty room upstairs and whatever remained of her conscience making noise. She called me on the third night. I answered because Mara was beside me and because sometimes evidence comes wearing grief. "Dad," she said. I said nothing. She cried. This time it sounded real. That did not make it clean. I did not know he was giving you something in the tea. That was the first lie. Not because I had proof yet. Because of how she placed it. She went straight to the one act she wanted separated from herself. I stayed quiet. She kept going. I knew about the documents. I knew about the transition plan. But I thought it was better. I thought you were going to ruin everything Mom built because you were not thinking clearly. Martin said if we did not take control, the audit would expose mistakes and people would blame her. There it was. Martin said. The refuge of everyone who chooses wrong and wants grammar to soften it. What mistakes? I asked. She sobbed. The foundation money. Mara's pen started moving. Whose mistakes? A long pause. Mine. One honest word. Mine. I closed my eyes. My daughter was still in there somewhere. That made it worse. Because monsters without conscience are easier to hate. People with conscience who keep choosing the lie are harder. She told us enough that night. Not all. Enough. Martin had introduced the consulting fees. Caroline had approved the first ones because the foundation was behind on paperwork and Miriam was too ill to manage details. Then came a personal debt. Then a second transfer. Then a forged scholarship report. Then Martin said fixing the problem would require temporary control of my accounts and the foundation. Then Miriam grew suspicious. Then Martin suggested my grief and age could become useful if handled carefully. Caroline did not say yes at first. She said not no long enough for yes to grow. That is how some crimes happen. Not with a grand decision. With a series of cowardly permissions. By the end of the call, Navarro had enough for charges against Martin and enough to bring Caroline in formally. She asked one question before hanging up. Is Caleb with you? He is safe, I said. Can I talk to him? No. The word hurt. It still had to be said. The arrests happened quietly. Martin first. He tried to talk. Of course he did. He asked for counsel while explaining things anyway, which Sam later called the arrogance reflex. Caroline surrendered through Mara the next morning. She wore no makeup. Her hair was unwashed. She looked younger and older at the same time. When they took her through the side entrance, she saw me standing near the hall. For a moment she looked like my little girl again. Not because she was innocent. Because consequence reduces people to something small. Dad, she said. I wanted to say 100 things. How could you? Your mother knew. Caleb heard you. You let him pour me tea. You made me perform weakness in my own house. You sold your mother's name one invoice at a time. Instead I said, tell the truth now. It is the only useful thing left. She nodded once. Then they took her inside. The next months were slow. That is the part no one tells you in stories. The climax ends. Then paperwork begins. Restraining orders. Custody hearings. Foundation recovery. Asset freezes. Medical reviews. Financial tracing. Statement corrections. Report after report after report. Caleb stayed with me under temporary guardianship while the court sorted what his childhood had become. He was quiet at first. Not sad exactly. Listening. Children who have spent too long around adult secrets listen even when nobody speaks. The first week, he asked if he had ruined his mother. I told him the truth. No. You saved me. Adults ruin themselves. He looked unconvinced. So I said it again. And again. Some truths need repetition before a child can believe them. At night he slept in the guest room with the door open. The hallway light stayed on. I never complained about the electricity. He had earned every watt. One evening, I found him standing in the music room beside the Steinway. Where does it breathe? He asked. I sat beside him on the bench and opened the false bottom. Empty now. Miriam's ledger was locked with Mara. But the space remained. Here, I said, tapping the wood under the seat. Your grandmother said good pianos breathe through the soundboard, but secrets breathe through whatever opening brave people give them. He made a face. That sounds like something Grandma would say. It does. It is kind of weird. She was also weird. He smiled. Small. Real. The first real smile since the funeral. That smile was worth more than every account Martin tried to steal. The court case did not become a spectacle. Mara made sure of that where she could. The foundation board removed Caroline. Martin's company cut ties publicly, then privately pretended they had always been concerned. They had not. Institutions often discover concern right after liability discovers them. Dennis recovered enough money through frozen accounts and the condo sale to restore the scholarships. Not all at once. Enough. Every student Miriam intended to help received the money promised to them. I insisted on signing those letters myself. Not because my signature was needed. Because after everything they tried to make my hand sign, I wanted it to sign something clean. Martin eventually pleaded. Fraud. Financial exploitation. Attempted coercion. Related charges tied to the medication and recordings. He did not get the dramatic courtroom collapse I once fantasized about. He got something better. A slow public reduction. His polished language read back to him in plain English. His emails displayed without tone. His invoices placed beside the children's names he used. His transition plan shown beside the T analysis. His own phrase repeated by the prosecutor. After Saturday, your grandfather will be easier. There are sentences that cannot survive daylight. That was one of them. Caroline's case was different. She cooperated after arrest. Not immediately. Not nobly. But eventually. She admitted the foundation transfers. She admitted she knew the documents would remove my control. She admitted she hid the purpose from me. She admitted she used Caleb's access as emotional leverage. She denied knowing the full medication plan until evidence made denial useless. That hurt more than Martin's lies. Because Martin's lies were architecture. Caroline's were family furniture. Familiar. Close. Placed where love used to sit. At sentencing, she asked to speak. I did not want to hear it. Caleb was not present. That was non-negotiable. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor wax. Caroline stood in a gray dress and read from 2 pages. She apologized to the court. To the foundation. To Caleb. To me. To Miriam. When she said her mother's name, her voice broke. I looked down. Not because I forgave her. Because I did not want to watch whether the break was real. I was tired of measuring my daughter's tears. The judge listened. Then she said something I still remember exactly. Grief did not make this happen. Debt did not make this happen. Influence did not make this happen. Choices made this happen. Choices. That word is heavy when it lands correctly. Caroline received fewer years than Martin. Some people thought it was too light. Some thought it was too harsh. I had no interest in prison math. Consequence mattered. Caleb's safety mattered more. Miriam's name was cleared. The foundation was restored. The house remained mine. And the quiet paper never became quiet. It became evidence. That was the revenge. Not yelling. Not violence. Not a dramatic speech over a ruined dinner. I let them bring the paper they thought would silence me. I let them explain it. I let them connect Caleb to compliance, the house to care, the foundation to control, and my grief to their plan. Then I let the room record what their own mouths had built. The paper they meant to use as a key became the lock on their own cage. That is the only kind of revenge I can respect now. The kind that turns a predator's method into his evidence. A year later, the lake house sounds different. That may sound strange. Houses do not really sound different. People do. For months after the arrests, every noise made me look up. A cup placed too softly. A cabinet closing. A car slowing near the driveway. Caleb had the same habit. We were 2 people learning ordinary sound again. The keypad is gone. I put the old brass deadbolt back. Not because old locks are safer. Because that one was ours. There is a new rule in the house. No one changes a lock without everyone at the table knowing why. No one makes tea for someone else without leaving the box on the counter. No one uses the word safety when they mean control. Caleb wrote that last one on a sticky note and placed it inside the kitchen cabinet. His handwriting still leans too hard to the right. Miriam would have loved that. The music room is open again. For a while I could not enter it without seeing the red ledger. Now I see Caleb at the piano, picking out notes with one finger while pretending he does not care whether I listen. He is not good yet. Do not tell him I said that. He has Miriam's seriousness and my impatience, which means the piano may survive us both only by mercy. Every Saturday, one of Miriam's scholarship students comes for lessons. The foundation is smaller now. Cleaner. Mara sits on the board. Dennis audits quarterly and complains about the coffee. Sam says he is retired, then shows up whenever a background check gets complicated. Rosa brings cookies that are too hard and gets offended if anyone softens them in milk. Life did not become perfect. That is another lie stories tell when they are in a hurry. Caleb misses his mother. Of course he does. Love does not disappear because truth arrives. Sometimes truth makes love more complicated. He writes to Caroline through a therapist. I do not read the letters unless he asks me to. Sometimes he asks. Sometimes he does not. I respect both. I visited Caroline once. 6 months after sentencing. I had told myself I was going only because Caleb had questions. That was partly true. The other part was that fathers do not stop being fathers cleanly. Even when daughters become defendants. She looked smaller through the glass. No soft sweaters. No controlled house. No Martin answering for her. Just Caroline. My daughter. The woman who almost signed me away. She cried when she saw me. I did not comfort her quickly. That was new for me. How is Caleb? She asked. Growing. She nodded. Does he hate me? He is 10. Some days he misses you. Some days he is angry. Some days he wants pancakes and does not want to think about any of us. She smiled through tears. He always did love pancakes. I said nothing. After a while, she whispered, "Did Mom know?" I thought about lying. A merciful lie. A fatherly lie. Then I thought of Miriam's red ledger and all the damage soft lies had done. Yes, I said. Enough. Caroline closed her eyes. That hurt her. Good. Some pain is not cruelty. Some pain is reality finally arriving where it was invited years too late. Did she hate me? Caroline asked. No. That answer was true. Miriam did not hate easily. Would she forgive me? That one I did not answer right away. Your mother believed forgiveness without truth is just another hiding place. Start with truth. Ask about forgiveness later. Caroline cried then. Not pretty. Not controlled. I let her. When I left, I did not feel healed. But I felt honest. Sometimes that is the first clean room you get. The final image I want to leave you with is not the arrest. Not the dining room. Not Martin's face when the detective walked in. Not even the quiet paper sealed in an evidence bag. It is one evening in early June, almost 8 months after everything broke open. The windows were open because the house was warm. The lake smelled like rain, though no rain had come yet. Caleb sat at the piano with his feet not quite reaching the pedals. I stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of cocoa because apparently old men can drink cocoa if a child insists hard enough. He played 3 wrong notes, stopped, and looked at me. Grandma would have noticed. Immediately, I said. Would she be mad? Only if you pretended they were right. He considered that. Then he played the same 3 notes again, wrong in exactly the same way, and laughed before I could say anything. That laugh filled the room. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But fully. A sound no one had managed. A sound no quiet paper could touch. On the piano bench beside him sat a new red ledger. Empty except for 1 line on the first page. Caleb had written it himself. Things we tell the truth about. That was his idea. Not mine. Every Sunday, we add something. Small things mostly. I was scared when the phone rang. I miss Mom today. I broke the blue mug. Grandpa burned the toast and blamed the toaster. Sometimes the truth is not grand. Sometimes it is just practice. But practice matters. Lies had almost taken my house, my wife's legacy, my grandson's childhood, and my name from my own hand. Truth brought them back 1 line at a time. If you are listening to this story and something in your own family feels wrong, do not ignore it because the person speaking sounds reasonable. Reasonable people can still lie. Soft voices can still steal. Safety can become a leash when the wrong person holds the word. Ask questions. Keep records. Listen to children when they whisper. Listen to the dead if they loved you enough to leave a map. And never forget this. Real family protection is not about controlling the people you love. It is about refusing to let control dress itself up as love. My daughter changed the lock because she thought I was too broken to notice the door. My grandson whispered because he was brave enough to risk being heard. My wife hid a red ledger because even while dying, she knew truth needs somewhere to wait. And me. I almost missed all of it. That is the part one carry. But almost is not the same as too late. Not if you move. Not if you listen. Not if you are willing to look foolish for the sake of the people who still need you. The quiet paper was supposed to take my voice. Instead it gave me back my family. And in the end, the house did not become theirs. The story did not become theirs. My wife's name did not become theirs. They tried to make me sign away everything while I was grieving. But grief did not make me weak. It made me dangerous in the one way they never expected. I had nothing left to protect except what mattered. And that made me very hard to silence. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me what part hit you hardest. Have you ever seen someone use care as a way to control another person? Have you ever ignored a warning feeling and later wished you had listened sooner? Your story may help someone else recognize the quiet paper in their own life before they sign it. And if you want more stories like this, stories about family secrets, betrayal, courage, and the kind of revenge that comes from truth instead of rage, stay with me. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in a house is not the locked door. Sometimes it is the person smiling while they say they changed the lock for your own good. There was one more thing I did not understand until much later. The quiet paper was never just about money. Money was the visible prize. The house. The foundation. The lakefront land. The accounts Miriam and I had spent a lifetime building without ever feeling rich because responsible people rarely feel rich while they are still responsible. But money was only the part that could be counted. The deeper theft was authorship. They wanted the right to tell the story. That Arthur declined after Miriam died. That Caroline stepped in bravely. That Martin provided professional guidance. That Caleb was protected from distress. That the foundation needed restructuring. That the lake house was sold for care. That the old man became confused, then grateful, then quiet. A clean story. A respectable story. A story people could repeat at church without feeling the need to lower their voices. That is why the red ledger mattered so much. It did not only contain numbers. It contained Miriam's refusal to let them narrate her death for profit. I think about that often now. How many families lose not only money or homes or heirlooms, but the story itself? How many old people get described into silence? Difficult. Confused. Bitter. Declining. Unstable. Unable to adjust. Those words may be true sometimes. Age is real. Grief is real. Illness is real. But words become weapons when the person using them benefits from the listener becoming smaller. Martin understood that. Caroline learned it from him. And I, fool that I was, had seen the same tactic in other people's records for years without recognizing it when it walked through my front door carrying a toolkit and a new lock. The first time I returned to the church after the funeral, it was for a scholarship recital. Caleb did not want to go. He said churches made his stomach feel tight now. I told him we could leave any time. That was another new rule. Any time means any time. Not after the song. Not after the speech. Not after adults finish pretending. Any time. We sat near the back. The first student was a shy girl named Lucia who wore a blue dress and stared at the floor until her teacher whispered something that made her smile. Then she sat at the piano and played a piece Miriam used to assign to beginners who had more feeling than technique. The notes were uneven. The timing wandered. Miriam would have marked the page gently and told her that music is not a race unless you are trying to escape the song. I could hear her voice so clearly I had to close my eyes. Caleb leaned against me. Not hiding. Just leaning. Halfway through the recital, he whispered, "Grandma helped pay for this." Yes. Mom took some of it. I did not rush the answer. Yes. But it came back. Some did. Enough to keep going. He watched Lucia finish and bow. Everyone clapped. Caleb clapped too. Then he said, "Then Grandma won a little." I looked at him. That was the child's version of justice. Not prison. Not restitution. Not legal language. A little win for the person who had tried to do good. Yes, I said. She won a little. Afterward, an older woman I did not know touched my arm and said, "Your wife would be proud." People say that too easily sometimes. But this time I let myself believe it. Not because everything had been fixed. Because something had been protected. Protection is not the same as repair. That is another thing I learned. You can protect what remains without pretending nothing was broken. My relationship with Caroline remains a room I do not know how to furnish. Some days I feel anger so clean it almost feels like strength. Some days I remember her at 7 years old standing on a stool beside Miriam, pressing cookie dough into uneven circles, and I feel a grief I do not know where to put. Some days both arrive together and I have to sit down until the house stops tilting. I do not know whether forgiveness will ever become a real door between us. I know it cannot be another false lock. That is enough for now. Caleb is older now by the small but unmistakable amount children become older after surviving adult failure. He asks better questions than I deserve. One night, while we were washing dishes, he asked, "Why did Mom listen to Martin more than herself?" I had no easy answer. So I gave him the best one I had. Because sometimes people want someone else to make the wrong choice sound smart. He thought about that while drying a plate. So Martin made it sound smart. Yes. But she still chose. Yes. He nodded. Then he said, "I do not want people making my bad ideas sound smart." That is a good rule. Can we write it in the Red Book? So we did. Do not let people make bad ideas sound smart. It sits now between Grandpa burned toast and I miss Mom today. That is what healing looks like in our house. Not pretty. Not linear. Sometimes funny by accident. Sometimes heavy in the middle of breakfast. Always written down when truth needs a place to stand. I keep Miriam's original ledger in a safe now. Not hidden. Protected. There is a difference. Once a month, I open it. I do not know why. Maybe to visit her mind. Maybe to remind myself that love can be practical. People talk about love like it is mostly feeling. Miriam's love was also dates, names, amounts, and questions written in blue ink while her hands hurt. Her love was leaving a map. Caleb's love was whispering when he was afraid. Mara's love was saying hard things without cushioning them. Sam's love, if he would permit that word, was showing up with evidence and bad coffee. Mine came late. But it came. And because it came, the quiet paper never became the final word. That is why I tell this story. Not because I want you to hate my daughter. Hate is easy and not very useful. I tell it because someone listening may have a Martin in the house. Someone may have a Caroline who always sounds reasonable when asking for one more signature. Someone may have a Caleb whispering in fragments because no adult has yet earned the whole truth. Someone may be holding a cup they did not pour, wondering why love suddenly tastes like sleep. If that is you, pay attention. Not with panic. With clarity. Panic makes noise. Clarity makes records. Ask who benefits. Ask why now. Ask why the helper needs secrecy. Ask why the person calling you unsafe is also asking for control. Ask why a document must be signed today if it is truly meant to protect tomorrow. And most of all, ask what the child is trying to say without saying it directly. Children often speak around danger before they speak about it. They test the room. They test your face. They test whether truth will make you explode or protect them. Caleb tested me with a whisper. Thank God I finally listened. Because one more cup, one more signature, one more weekend, and the story might have belonged to them forever. It does not. It belongs now to the red ledger. To the piano that breathed. To the grandson who told the truth. To the wife who knew. And to every person who has ever been called confused by someone who needed them quiet. The first night after Caleb moved into my house, I learned that safety does not return as one clean feeling. It returns in small tests. He tested the hallway light by leaving it on and watching whether I complained. He tested the pantry by asking twice if he was allowed to take crackers without asking first. He tested the new access code by standing at the back door, pressing the numbers slowly, then looking over his shoulder as if Caroline might appear behind him and say the code belonged to adults only. I did not rush him. I did not tell him everything was fine, because children who have lived around quiet threats do not believe easy comfort. I only stood in the kitchen making sandwiches and said the code worked for him too. The second time he opened the door by himself, his shoulders dropped a little. That was how healing began in our house, not with speeches, not with a dramatic promise, but with a child learning that a door could open when he needed it to open. Miriam's red ledger stayed on the kitchen table for 3 days after the arrests. I could not bring myself to put it away. Every time I passed it, I saw her hand in the margins, the little arrows she used when she wanted me to notice a contradiction, the underlined dates, the page where she had written Caroline is not asking for help, she is asking for control. I had read those words before, but after the signing room they sounded different. They no longer felt like suspicion from a dying woman. They felt like testimony. Caleb asked if Grandma had known everything. I told him she knew enough to be brave with the time she had. That answer seemed to satisfy him, but it did not satisfy me. I wanted one more conversation with Miriam. I wanted to ask why she had not shaken me awake sooner, why she had trusted me to understand a clue hidden under a piano bench when I had missed so many louder things. Then I remembered the truth. She had spent her final strength leaving a map. It was my job to learn how to read it. Detective Navarro came to the house 2 mornings later with 2 officers and a box of clear evidence bags. He was careful with everything. The pharmacy receipts, the tea tin, the quiet paper copies, the photographs from Miriam's piano bench, the old foundation statements, Caleb's folded church program, even the chipped cup from my nightstand. He treated each piece like it mattered. That did something to me. For weeks I had felt like a foolish old man trying to convince the world that polite people can be dangerous. Watching a detective place Caroline's neat handwriting into a bag with a label made the truth feel heavier, but also more real. Navarro told me that cases like this often fail when families start softening the facts out of shame. He said, "Arthur, do not clean up their language for them. Let their own words stay ugly." I wrote that down later in the ledger, because it was the first legal advice that sounded like moral advice too. Caroline called from a blocked number the day after Navarro left. I knew it was her before she spoke, because my body knew the silence. A father recognizes his child even through a pause. She did not cry at first. She used the voice she had used with nurses, neighbors, and church women, soft enough to sound wounded, controlled enough to sound reasonable. She said, "Dad, this has gone too far." She said Martin had pressured her. She said grief had made everyone confused. She said Caleb needed his mother and I was letting strangers tear the family apart. I listened without answering, because every reply would have given her something to climb on. When she finally stopped, I said one sentence. "Caroline, Caleb is safe tonight." That was all. For the first time in my life, my daughter's silence did not make me reach for comfort. It made me understand the size of what she had done. She was not asking about truth. She was asking whether the old door into me still opened. It did not open. That was one of the hardest things I have ever chosen. People like to imagine protective love as something fierce and loud, but sometimes it is quiet refusal. It is not answering the second call. It is not reading the third message. It is giving the phone to Detective Navarro instead of carrying your daughter's excuses in your own pocket. All my life I had believed parenthood meant staying available. Miriam used to say that was my weakness and my virtue wearing the same coat. She was right. Caroline had used that availability like a key. So I changed more than the lock on the house. I changed the lock inside myself. I still loved my daughter. That is the part people misunderstand. Love does not vanish just because truth arrives. But love was no longer allowed to manage the evidence. Love was no longer allowed to make Caleb unsafe. Love was no longer allowed to sign quiet paper. The foundation board meeting happened in the same room where Miriam used to host student recitals. Before everything broke open, Caroline had moved the old music stands into storage and replaced the photographs on the wall with clean corporate prints. That detail hurt more than I expected. Miriam had kept pictures of every scholarship student who had ever played in that room, even the ones who missed half their notes and cried after the performance. She said a room remembers what you ask it to hold. Caroline had asked it to hold paperwork. So before the board arrived, Caleb and I carried the photographs back in. We lined them along the mantel, not perfectly, not like a museum, but like a family. When Mara arrived, she smiled at the wall and said Miriam would have approved. Dennis opened his folder, cleared his throat, and spent 40 minutes explaining where the money had gone. Nobody interrupted. Numbers can sound dry until they show you the route of betrayal. Dennis did not speak like a man telling a story. He spoke like a man repairing a machine. A transfer from the foundation account. A consulting fee routed through Harbor Quiet Care Limited Liability Company. A reimbursement that matched a payment on Martin's private credit line. A scholarship delay justified by administrative review. A donation held for quiet restructuring. Every soft phrase had a hard destination. By the time he finished, the room felt older. One board member, a retired school principal named Lydia Crane, put both hands flat on the table and said, "Miriam trusted us." I expected anger after that. Instead there was shame. Shame can be useful if it moves people toward correction instead of performance. We voted to freeze the damaged accounts, restore the scholarship calendar, remove Caroline's authority, and publish a plain notice to the families. No drama. No polished language. Just the truth, because Miriam's name deserved a room without fog. That evening Caleb asked why adults use words like restructuring when they mean stealing. I told him because stealing sounds like something bad people do, and restructuring sounds like something important people do. He thought about that for a long time while pushing peas around his plate. Then he asked if every big word was dangerous. I said no. Some big words help us name things properly. Coercion. Evidence. Custody. Restitution. Consent. The danger comes when a word is used to make you stop asking what is really happening. He nodded, then asked if quiet was a big word too. That question stayed with me. Quiet is small on paper, but in a family it can become enormous. Quiet can be peace. Quiet can be fear. Quiet can be respect. Quiet can be surrender. The difference is whether people are allowed to speak when something matters. The custody hearing was not the loud battle I had feared. It was worse in a slower way. There were no slammed doors, no movie scene confession, no one pointing across a courtroom. There were folders, sworn statements, soft voices, and a judge who read more than she spoke. Caroline appeared by video, her face pale, her hair pulled back, her eyes swollen enough to tell one story and dry enough to tell another. She said she had made mistakes under pressure. She said Martin had isolated her. She said she had wanted to protect me from grief and Caleb from confusion. The judge let her talk. That was hard to watch. I wanted someone to stop her every time she wrapped control inside concern. But Beatrice leaned toward me and whispered, "Let the lie show its full shape." So I sat still. I had learned by then that patience can be a weapon when truth is already in the room. When it was my turn to speak, I did not call Caroline evil. I did not call Martin a monster. Those words might have felt good for 1 second, but they would have made the truth smaller. I told the judge about the first cup of sleepy tea. I told her about Caleb's whisper in the church parking lot. I told her about Miriam's ledger and the false bottom in the Steinway bench. I told her about the quiet paper and the signing room and the way Martin spoke about competence as if it were a door he could close from the outside. Then I said the sentence I had practiced alone in the bathroom mirror because I knew my voice might fail. My daughter did not become dangerous because she stopped loving us. She became dangerous because she decided her fear mattered more than our freedom. The judge looked down at her notes for a long time after that. Caleb did not testify in the way Caroline feared. We fought that hard. No child should have to become the bridge adults walk across to reach consequences. Instead, the court used carefully handled statements from the child specialist and the church program he had slipped into my coat. His words were read aloud by someone trained not to turn pain into theater. Grandpa, do not drink the sleepy tea tonight. Mom says after the third cup you sign faster. The courtroom changed when those words entered it. I felt it the way you feel a storm arrive before rain. Caroline lowered her face. Martin stared straight ahead. I looked at the table because I could not look at Caleb's sentence and stay fully steady. Some truths are too small to defend against. That is their power. They do not argue. They simply stand there and make every excuse look ridiculous. The temporary order gave Caleb safety, structure, and distance. Those are plain words, but that day they felt like a roof. He would stay with me while the criminal case moved forward. Caroline's contact would be supervised. Martin would have none. The house access remained changed. The foundation authority remained frozen. Medical decisions about me were mine again, in writing, with no quiet paper hiding behind family concern. When the judge finished, I expected relief to hit me. It did not. What hit me first was exhaustion. I stood in the hallway holding a folder against my chest while people moved around us, and for a moment I felt every year in my body. Then Caleb came out of the waiting room with Mara beside him. He looked at my face and asked, "Did the paper lose?" I told him yes. He did not smile right away. He only reached for my hand. That was better. A few weeks later, Martin's lawyer tried to make the story about age. That was the predictable move. Arthur Whitmore was grieving. Arthur Whitmore was confused. Arthur Whitmore misunderstood ordinary estate planning. Arthur Whitmore had been influenced by an investigator, a notary, a nervous child, and a dead wife's old suspicions. I read that argument in a legal filing while sitting at the same kitchen table where Miriam had once taught Caleb to count quarter notes. The words should have frightened me. Instead they clarified something. Martin still thought the old strategy could work if he moved it into legal language. He still believed that if he called me confused often enough, reality might step aside. Beatrice laughed when she read it. Not a happy laugh. A courthouse laugh. Then she said, "Men like Martin always think paper belongs to them because they know how to format it. They forget paper also keeps fingerprints." The fingerprints were everywhere, not only the literal ones on the tea tin and the envelope, but the moral ones left by repeated choices. Martin's calendar entry for the signing. Caroline's pharmacy pickup. The text about keeping Dad calm. The draft competence letter saved under the wrong file name. The foundation transfer request sent 2 days before Miriam's memorial scholarship review. The Harbor Vale brochure Martin had annotated with access questions. The voice recording from the controlled signing where he said the house needed to move before Arthur became difficult again. Difficult. I used to hate that word after everything happened. Then Mara corrected me. She said difficult is what dishonest people call you when you stop being useful. I put that in the red ledger too. It belonged there. Caroline wrote me one real letter before sentencing. Real is the wrong word maybe. Handwritten is better. 3 pages. Blue ink. Careful loops. No lawyer had drafted it, that much was clear. She wrote about childhood summers, Miriam's pancakes, the lake, the night I slept in a chair beside her when she had pneumonia. She wrote that Martin had made her feel seen at a time when grief had made her feel invisible. She wrote that debt had become a room she could not get out of. She wrote that she never meant for Caleb to be afraid. That sentence stopped me. Not because I believed it. Because I wanted to. A parent's heart is a dangerous reader. It searches even ugly pages for the child it remembers. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and gave it to Navarro. Not because I was cruel. Because I was done letting my longing decide what counted as evidence. Later, when Caleb was asleep, I sat on the porch and let myself remember Caroline at 7 years old. She had once fallen off the dock and come up furious, not scared, hair pasted to her face, shouting that the lake had cheated. Miriam laughed so hard she had to sit down. That girl had existed. I will not pretend she did not. But memory is not a pardon. If we confuse the child someone was with the choices they make as an adult, we hand them a weapon and call it mercy. That was one of the hardest lessons of the whole nightmare. Caroline had been my daughter before she became Caleb's danger. Both things were true. I had to love the first truth without obeying the second one. Nobody teaches you how to do that. You learn it one quiet refusal at a time. The first scholarship recital after the arrests nearly broke me in a good way. We held it in the music room with the photographs back on the wall. The Steinway had been tuned properly this time, not as an excuse, not as cover, but because music deserves honesty too. Sam sat in the back row with his arms crossed, pretending not to care whether the instrument sounded good. Mara stood near the doorway checking exits out of habit. Dennis arrived late and apologized to nobody because accountants believe punctuality is for people who do not understand traffic. Caleb wore a navy sweater Miriam had once bought too large, and now it fit him almost perfectly. The first student played a piece with more courage than accuracy. When she finished, nobody rushed to polite applause. We let the last note settle. Then the room clapped like it had been waiting months to breathe. After the recital, Caleb asked if Grandma had heard it. I told him I did not know exactly how heaven worked, but if there was any justice in the universe, Miriam had complained about the tempo and loved every second anyway. He smiled at that. A real smile. Not the careful one he used when adults were watching for the wrong reason. Then he asked if the piano still breathed. I took him to the bench and showed him the place where the false bottom had been repaired. I told him yes, but differently now. Before, it breathed because Miriam hid truth inside it. Now it breathed because we did not need to hide the truth there anymore. He ran his fingers along the wood and said, "Good." Then he asked if he could keep one copy of the church program. I said yes, but only if we put it somewhere safe and never somewhere secret. He liked that distinction. Safe and secret became two important words in our house. We used them often. Caleb's school therapist liked that. She said children who grow up around manipulation need clean categories. I did too, though I was old enough to pretend otherwise. A safe thing can be private, but it can be spoken about with the right people. A secret thing demands silence even when silence hurts someone. A safe room has a door that opens. A secret room has a rule that says you are bad for wanting air. A safe paper explains itself. A secret paper pressures you to sign before you can read. We wrote those differences in the red ledger one Saturday afternoon while rain tapped the windows. Caleb decorated the page with little locks, all open. I did not ask him to make them open. He chose that himself. The lake house changed after that. Not because we renovated everything, but because the meaning of ordinary things shifted. The front door code belonged to both of us. The tea canisters moved to a glass shelf where labels faced outward. The medicine cabinet got a simple inventory sheet, not because I wanted to live like a hospital, but because hidden doses had stolen enough from us. The piano bench stayed in the music room, repaired and empty. Miriam's red ledger moved to a fireproof box, but the new ledger, Caleb's ledger, stayed on the kitchen shelf where anyone could see it. Its title was Things We Tell the Truth About. The first page was about doors. The second page was about tea. The third page was about money. The fourth page was blank for a long time. Then one morning Caleb wrote, "I miss Mom and I am mad at her." He showed it to me like he expected the sentence to be too heavy. I told him it was one of the most honest sentences in the house. Missing someone who hurt you is one of the cruelest forms of grief. Adults struggle with it. Children have to grow language around it from nothing. Caleb loved Caroline. Of course he did. She was his mother. He also feared her. He also missed her. He also remembered good mornings, bedtime songs, birthday candles, and the way she used to draw little moons on his lunch notes. None of those memories erased what she had done. None of what she had done erased that those memories had once been real to him. So we stopped trying to make his heart choose one clean lane. Some days he cried because he wanted her. Some days he refused to say her name. Some days he asked if bad choices are stronger than love. I told him bad choices can damage love, but they do not get to rename it. He said that sounded like something Grandma would say. I took that as a compliment. The criminal case against Martin moved faster than Caroline's because Martin had fewer emotional hiding places. Juries may not understand every document, but they understand a man who smiles while explaining why another person's signature needs to be obtained before he gets difficult. They understand a tea sample matched to receipts. They understand a child warning his grandfather not to drink. They understand a notary who says the signing was staged because she feared elder exploitation. They understand an investigator laying out dates until concern becomes a pattern and pattern becomes intent. Martin's face on the second day of hearings told me he had finally realized charm was not evidence. He kept adjusting his cuff like the right gesture might return him to the world where he controlled the room. It did not. Some rooms do not give power back once truth has entered. Caroline's case was harder to watch because she kept looking for me. Not constantly. Just enough. A glance before the judge entered. A glance when Caleb's name came up. A glance when Miriam's ledger was discussed. Every glance asked an old question. Are you still my father? The answer was yes, but not in the way she wanted. Yes, I was her father, which meant I would tell the truth even when it wounded both of us. Yes, I remembered the child she had been, which meant I knew exactly how far she had walked from herself. Yes, I loved her, which meant I would not allow her to keep calling harm protection. That is the part of fatherhood nobody puts on greeting cards. Sometimes you prove love by refusing to rescue someone from the consequences that might be the only honest mirror left. At sentencing, I did not ask for revenge. I know that sounds strange after everything, but by then revenge had changed meaning for me. I no longer wanted Caroline destroyed. I wanted Caleb free from the story she had built around him. I wanted Miriam's work protected. I wanted Martin unable to put his hand on another family's paperwork and call it care. I wanted every document they had twisted to be answered by a cleaner document with public language, signatures, dates, and consequences. So when the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I stood and said only what mattered. They tried to make my age look like weakness, my grief look like confusion, my grandson's fear look like imagination, and my wife's warning look like bitterness. The evidence showed otherwise. I asked the court to protect the living truth better than we protected it in our home. That was enough. The judge's words were not poetic. I was grateful for that. Poetry can sometimes soften things that should stay sharp. She spoke about exploitation, coercion, financial abuse, and the deliberate manipulation of family trust. She said the quiet paper was not an isolated document, but part of a larger pressure system. Pressure system. That phrase stayed with me. It named what we had lived inside. Not one lie. Not one cup of tea. Not one forged intention. A system. Systems do not break because one person feels sorry. They break when enough truth enters from enough directions at the same time. Miriam's ledger. Caleb's warning. Mara's investigation. Dennis's tracing. Beatrice's refusal. Navarro's evidence. My own decision not to drink the third cup. Every piece mattered. Evil likes to look inevitable from inside the room. From outside, it is often just a chain of choices waiting to be interrupted. After sentencing, the house was quiet in a new way. Not empty quiet. Not frightened quiet. Tired quiet. The kind that comes after a storm has passed but the furniture is still damp. Caleb and I ordered pizza because neither of us had the strength for a proper dinner. We ate at the kitchen counter from paper plates while Miriam's portrait watched us from the wall. Halfway through his second slice, Caleb asked if people can come back from what they did. I knew he was asking about Caroline, though he did not say her name. I told him some people come back to truth, some only come back to wanting comfort, and it takes time to tell the difference. He asked if we would know. I said we would watch actions, not speeches. He nodded, then asked if we could change the house code again, not because he was afraid, but because he wanted the new one to be ours. We changed it after dinner. The new code was Miriam's birthday written out as words in Caleb's notebook, not as numbers on the page. He said numbers had been used too much in the case. Money amounts. Dates. Times. Codes. Account records. He wanted words for once. I understood that. So we wrote the code in a sentence only the two of us would remember, then locked the notebook in the same fireproof box as the red ledger. Not secret. Safe. There is a difference. The next morning he used the new code before school. The lock clicked. The door opened. He looked back at me and smiled. It was not a huge smile. It did not need to be. Some victories are small enough to fit inside a door latch and still large enough to change the air in a house. Months later, when the foundation sent out its restored scholarship letters, I drove to the post office myself. I could have mailed them from the box at the end of the street, but that felt too casual. Miriam had written the first scholarship letter by hand at our dining table with a cheap pen and a seriousness that made me tease her until she threatened to make me lick the stamp. I remembered that as I stood in line between a man shipping fishing lures and a woman arguing about postage. Ordinary life all around me. That is what I wanted back. Not a perfect life. Not a life without grief. Just an ordinary one where papers said what they meant, where doors opened, where children did not whisper warnings in church parking lots. When the clerk took the envelopes, I felt something leave my shoulders. Not all the weight. Enough. On the anniversary of Miriam's funeral, Caleb and I went to the cemetery with 2 cups of coffee and 1 cup of hot chocolate. It was cold enough that the steam rose like little ghosts. I told her about the case, though I like to think she already knew most of it. Caleb told her about school, about the recital, about the new ledger, and about how I still burned toast if nobody supervised me. Then he got quiet and asked if he could say something alone. I walked to the path and gave him space. I did not try to listen. That mattered to me. Some words are safe because they are allowed to belong to one person first. When he came back, his eyes were wet but his face was calm. He said Grandma said to keep the piano tuned. I asked if she used those exact words. He said no, but he knew what she meant. For the first time in a long time, I laughed without checking whether the sound was allowed. People sometimes ask what happened to the quiet paper. They expect me to say I burned it. That would make a cleaner story, maybe. Fire is dramatic. Ashes feel final. But I did not burn it. I kept 1 copy in a folder with the court stamp across it. Not on the wall. Not as a trophy. In the file. Where it belongs. The quiet paper was born as a weapon, but once the truth took hold of it, it became evidence. I wanted Caleb to understand that objects do not always keep the meaning bad people give them. A paper can threaten you, then later protect you. A door can trap you, then later open. A ledger can begin as a dying woman's warning, then become a family's way back to speech. That is not magic. It is what happens when honest people stop surrendering the meaning of things. The last time I saw Caroline before the appeal process began, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, exactly. Smaller in certainty. She asked through her attorney whether I would accept a personal apology someday. Beatrice told me I did not have to answer. Navarro told me not to answer quickly. Mara told me apologies are often fishing lines. Caleb's therapist told me the question mattered less than the pattern after it. All of them were right. So I wrote one sentence back through counsel. Truth first. Apology later. That became another line in the new ledger. Caleb asked what it meant. I said it means sorry is not a broom. You do not get to sweep the broken glass under it and call the floor clean. He liked that. Then he asked if he could draw a broom next to the sentence. He drew one with bristles so wide it looked more like a tree. I kept it that way. As for Martin, I have no grand lesson about him. Some people want every villain to become a warning with clean edges. Martin was not clean. He was not brilliant either, not in the way he believed. He was patient, observant, and empty where shame should have lived. That combination can look like intelligence for a while. It can even look like leadership if the people around him are tired enough, grieving enough, or polite enough. But once the room stopped rewarding his calm voice, he had very little left. In the end, he was a man who mistook access for ownership and paperwork for truth. The law gave him consequences. Life will give him whatever comes after that. I do not spend much time imagining it. That is another kind of freedom. The story people outside the family tell is probably simpler than the one we lived. They say an old man was almost tricked into signing away his home. They say a grandson warned him. They say the dead wife left evidence. They say the daughter and son-in-law got caught. That version is true enough for a headline, but families do not heal inside headlines. We heal in the smaller rooms afterward. We heal while labeling tea. We heal while explaining court words to a child who should have been thinking about homework. We heal while deciding whether to answer a letter. We heal while putting old photographs back on a mantle. We heal while admitting that love and danger can come through the same doorway, and that once you know that, you must become wiser than your own longing. If there is one thing I would say to anyone hearing my voice now, it is this. Do not wait for betrayal to become dramatic before you believe it is real. Sometimes danger comes with a raised voice, but sometimes it comes with a casserole, a medical form, a helpful son-in-law, and a daughter saying she is only trying to make things easier. Sometimes the first warning is not a scream. It is a child squeezing your sleeve too tightly. It is a cup of tea you do not remember asking for. It is a phrase that appears in 3 different documents because the same person is writing all the stories. It is a dead wife's note hidden where the piano breathes. Listen sooner than I did. Ask the ugly question. Read the paper. Check the cup. Believe the whisper. There was another part of recovery I did not expect. Ordinary paperwork frightened me for a while. Bank forms. School forms. Medical forms. Even the little permission slip Caleb brought home for a field trip. I would see a blank signature line and feel my body tighten before my mind had time to explain why. That was the quiet paper's shadow. It had made a normal act feel dangerous. So Beatrice gave me a rule that sounded almost too simple to matter. Never sign tired. Never sign rushed. Never sign because someone says it is easier if you do not read. I wrote that rule on a card and taped it inside the kitchen cabinet where Caleb and I kept the cereal bowls. He saw it every morning. One day he asked if kids could use that rule too. I said they should. He thought about it, then said he would never agree to something just because someone was staring at him. That may have been one of the finest legal lessons ever taught over burnt toast. We also had to rebuild the way people came into our home. Before, I had believed openness was the same thing as kindness. Miriam believed in welcome too, but she had always been wiser about thresholds. She knew a home could be generous without being defenseless. So we made new habits. Visitors knocked. Family called before arriving. No one received a code because they were offended not to have one. No one touched medicine, mail, or financial papers unless I asked them to. Those rules might sound cold to someone who has never had love used as a master key. To me, they felt clean. A house should have warmth, but it should also have edges. Caleb liked the word edges. He said it made the house sound like a drawing that finally had lines again. Mara stayed in our lives longer than any invoice required. She said it was because she liked the coffee, which was a lie because my coffee has never been good enough to explain loyalty. The truth was simpler. She had seen the way this kind of betrayal leaves people looking over their shoulders, and she did not want us alone in the first stretch after the case. Some evenings she would come by with a folder, then close it without opening it because Caleb wanted to show her a science project or ask whether investigators ever wear disguises. She always answered him seriously. That mattered. Adults had spent too long talking around him. Mara talked to him, not as if he were grown, but as if his questions deserved honest weight. Slowly, he stopped whispering before asking hard things. One hard thing he asked was whether I hated Caroline. I was rinsing a plate when he said it, and the water kept running because I forgot to turn it off. Hate would have been easier to explain than the truth. Hate is clean in a child's mind. Love is not. I told him I hated what she did. I hated the fear she put in him. I hated the tea, the paper, the way she tried to make my grief useful. But I did not hate the baby I held in the hospital, or the girl who once wrote her name backward on Miriam's sheet music, or the woman she still might become if truth ever did its work inside her. Caleb listened, then said, "That sounds tiring." I told him it was. He said maybe that was why people choose hate. I told him maybe. Then he dried the plate without being asked. The first supervised call with Caroline came months later. Caleb chose to do it from the music room, not his bedroom. He wanted the piano there. I sat beside him but out of the screen. The specialist explained the rules, and for once rules felt like protection instead of pressure. Caroline appeared on the screen looking careful, as if even her face had been rehearsed. She said hello to Caleb and started to cry. He watched her quietly. Then he said, "Are you crying because you miss me or because someone is watching?" The specialist glanced at me, but I did not move. Caroline covered her mouth. For a second I saw pain in her that did not look performed. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was only the shock of being seen clearly by the child she had underestimated. Caleb did not punish her. He only waited for an answer. That was new strength in him, and it was not loud. After the call, he asked if he had been mean. I told him truth can feel mean to people who are used to softness protecting them. He asked if that meant he should say things softer. I said sometimes, but never so soft that the truth disappears. He wrote that in the ledger later. Never so soft that the truth disappears. The sentence looked too big in his child's handwriting, but maybe that was the point. Some truths are bigger than the hand that first writes them. I thought about Miriam then. Her hands near the end had been thin, the veins raised, the fingers tired, but she still wrote names, dates, clues, warnings. She still trusted that one day the right person would read what she could no longer say aloud. The least we could do was keep writing. I still sit on the dock some mornings before Caleb wakes. The lake has no opinion about human foolishness, which is probably why I trust it. It moves whether men lie or tell the truth. It shines on good days and bad ones. It held Miriam's reflection for decades and now it holds mine, older than I feel until I try to stand too fast. Sometimes I bring the red ledger with me. Sometimes I bring nothing. The important thing is that I sit there without waiting for someone else to tell me what is real. That is a gift I almost lost. Not my house. Not my money. Reality. The right to name what happened in my own life. Caroline and Martin tried to take that first. Everything else followed. So the real victory was not keeping the property or saving the foundation, though those things mattered. The real victory was getting our words back. The first morning Caleb called the lake house home, he did it by accident. He was looking for his shoes, late for school, hair sticking up, one sock inside out, shouting from the hallway, "Grandpa, I left my math folder at home." Then he stopped. I saw the realization hit him. Home. He had said it without permission, without testing the room first. I waited because I knew better than to touch the moment too quickly. He looked at me, almost embarrassed. I said, "Good. Then let us find it before your teacher decides this family has a paperwork curse." He laughed, and the laugh ran through the house like music Miriam would have recognized. That was when I knew the quiet paper had lost in the only way that mattered. Not in court. Not in the foundation minutes. Not in Martin's sentence or Caroline's supervised calls. It lost because a child said home and the word did not scare him. I used to think a family secret was something hidden in a drawer. A letter. A photograph. A receipt. A name nobody said at dinner. Now I know better. A family secret can also be a tone of voice. A word used too often. A door code changed without asking. A cup placed by your chair every night. A child going quiet when an adult enters the room. A document called simple by the person who benefits if you do not read it. That is why I keep the quiet paper framed in my study now. Not the original evidence copy. A blank page with those two words written across the top. Quiet paper. People sometimes ask why I would keep a reminder of something so ugly. I tell them because ugliness that gets named loses some of its power. Caleb understands that better than most adults. One afternoon he brought a school permission slip home and placed it on the table like it might bite him. "It needs a signature," he said. I looked at him. He looked at me. Then we both laughed. Not because it was funny exactly. Because sometimes healing arrives dressed as an ordinary form from a field trip to a science museum. I read every line out loud. He rolled his eyes halfway through and said, "Grandpa, it is just the museum." I said, "That is what they all say." He laughed again. Then I signed. A clean signature. Given freely. In a kitchen with open windows. No tea beside me. No one waiting to move me somewhere. No one using love as a leash. That is what they almost stole. Not only money. Not only property. The ordinary piece of signing your own name because you choose to. So when people ask me whether I got revenge, I tell them the truth. Yes. But not the kind angry men imagine first. I got to remain myself. I got to hear my grandson laugh without fear in the next room. I got to watch Miriam's scholarship students play badly, then better, then beautifully. I got to turn a document designed for silence into a record that spoke louder than any of us. But I will not pretend the revenge was only spiritual. There was a sweetness in watching Martin's own language undo him. There was a sweetness in seeing the man who worshipped paperwork trapped by paperwork. There was a sweetness in knowing the fake signature he celebrated became the cleanest proof that he never cared whether I consented. He wanted the lake house, the foundation, the accounts, and the right to call theft protection. Instead, the lake house stayed with Caleb, the foundation money went back to students, the condo bought with stolen funds was frozen, and Martin walked into court carrying the very words that convicted him. Caroline lost the easy story too. That mattered. Because some people do not fear guilt until guilt has consequences attached. That was enough. More than enough. Because the best revenge against people who want to erase you is not always to ruin them loudly. Sometimes it is to stay present, stay named, stay clear, and make sure their lies never again get to introduce themselves as love. The first Saturday after the sentencing, Caleb asked if we could go back to the lake before sunset. Not to the house. Not to the courtroom. Not to the office where Dennis had stacked the financial records until the table looked like it might give up. The lake. So we went. The three of us walked down the old wooden steps behind the house, past the cedar railing Miriam had painted twice because she hated the first shade, and onto the dock that still complained under my weight the same way it had complained when Caroline was young. Caleb carried the new red ledger under one arm. Arthur Whitmore, 72 years old, widower, grandfather, fool, witness, and finally something like a protector, stood behind him and watched him place that ledger on the bench at the end of the dock. Owen would have called that ceremonial. Miriam would have called it necessary. I called it the first honest quiet we had earned. The water was gray with late light. A single fishing boat moved slowly near the far shore. Somewhere across the lake, a dog barked twice and then stopped, as if even the world understood we needed a little room. Caleb opened the ledger to the first page and read the title again. Things we tell the truth about. Then he looked at me and asked, "Can the first truth be Grandma knew?" That question landed softly and deeply. Because yes. Miriam knew enough. Not all of it. Maybe not the whole shape. Maybe not the quiet paper. Maybe not the tea. Maybe not Martin's exact plan or Caroline's exact weakness. But she knew something was wrong inside the house she was leaving behind. She knew grief would make me slow. She knew love could be used against a man if he wanted peace badly enough. And she knew a hidden red book might someday reach me when a direct warning could not. So I said, yes. The first truth can be that Grandma knew. Caleb wrote it carefully. Grandma knew love needs proof sometimes. I did not correct him. I could not have improved it. Then he looked at the second line and asked what should come next. I thought about Caroline sitting in a county facility learning that regret and consequences are not the same thing. I thought about Martin losing every room where his voice had once sounded important. I thought about Mara rebuilding the foundation files with Dennis, Beatrice returning the first restored scholarship letters to students who never knew how close the money came to disappearing, and Sam changing the old locks one final time while muttering that people should need licenses before touching door hardware. Then I thought about the quiet paper itself. One folded sheet. One planned signature. One trap designed to turn an old man into a legal ghost. They had believed paperwork could make a lie official. They were wrong. Paper can carry lies, yes. But paper can also carry receipts. Notes. Dates. Names. A wife's red ledger. A child's warning. A confession signed by arrogance before a notary who already knew the truth. So I told Caleb the second truth. Write this. A quiet paper only wins if honest people stay quiet too. He wrote slowly, his tongue pressed against the corner of his mouth the way Miriam used to do when balancing the household checkbook. When he finished, he closed the ledger and rested both hands on top of it. Are we safe now? He asked. I wanted to say yes. Grandfathers are built to say yes when children are scared. But the whole point of the red ledger was that we were done making comfort more important than truth. So I said, we are safer. And we are not alone. That is better than pretending nothing can hurt us. He nodded like that answer made sense. Then he leaned against my side and we watched the water until the first porch light came on behind us. For years, I thought protection meant keeping the house calm. Now I know better. Protection means asking the ugly question before someone else turns your silence into permission. Protection means checking the cup before you drink the tea. Protection means reading the paper before you sign. Protection means believing the child who whispers when every adult in the room sounds reasonable. And sometimes, protection means becoming patient enough to let evil speak until it finally tells the truth on itself. That is what I did. Not because I was fearless. I was afraid almost every day. I did it because Miriam left me a map, Caleb gave me the first warning, and somewhere under all that grief I still knew this simple thing. A family can survive betrayal. But it cannot survive pretending betrayal is love. So we stopped pretending. And that is how the quiet paper lost.